You've never seen something like this. In a comically absurd few minutes during her speech, Candace Owens had to push back against accusations of racist violence by clowns, and I mean literal clowns. You'll know exactly what I mean when you watch this next clip, so subscribe to the channel and take a look before we dive in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, great.
Okay. So you like to learn, right? What did you learn from the Christchurch mosque shooting, where 51 people died at the hands of someone who is influenced by you above all other people? How did you change your rhetoric after this person shot 51 people?
Great question. So what she is referencing, one of the craziest media firestorms I've ever been in my life, in New Zealand is what she's talking about. There was a mosque shooting, and at 51, I'll take your number for it, people lost their lives. And apparently, and I actually haven't followed up on the story because I've never been to New Zealand. I don't talk about mosques. I don't talk about Muslims, so it would be very weird if this would have anything to do with me. But apparently they said that there was a online manifesto. I don't even know if that was officially attributed or if that was just early press. But they found a manifesto of the shooter online somewhere. Again, this was alleged early. I don't know if they've since debunked that. And apparently the person listed Nelson Mandela as his #1 inspiration, alongside Spyro the Dragon, which I believe is a child's cartoon, Spyro the Dragon. Maybe it's a video game, I don't know. And Candace Owens. Yeah, you know, I didn't feel like there was a lesson other than people are crazy and we shouldn't give credence to homicidal maniacs when they're putting together cartoons and people that fought against apartheid plus a random American in their thought process. So I learned that that was clearly an ill person, and that any person who believed or gave credence to a manifesto should probably re-examine why that is.
That should put this entire thing to rest, right? Well, apparently not, because despite the fact that the tragedy in Christchurch happened over 5 years ago, this accusation has chased Candace Owens no matter how much she'd try to disassociate from it. And you know what? I think it's one of the most disgraceful things you can do to literally believe the words of a deranged maniac that ended over 50 lives just to corner and guilt trip your political opponents. And on the topic of manifestos, for people that commit horrific acts like that, both the left and the right are in a significant disagreement. And it's ironic that a left that's so opposed to digging into manifestos to inspire more violence or to glorify criminals would quickly throw that attitude to the wind when it becomes politically convenient. Just to put it in the record, if you've read that document from the Christchurch attacker, it mentions Candace Owens once, and even in that, the attacker says he likes her ideas, but still believes she isn't extreme enough on most issues. That's because Candace has forcefully disavowed the idea of any race-based nationalism, despite the fact that she's been accused of doing so just because she'd said she wants to redefine and reclaim the word nationalist in order to use a bulwark against creeping globalism. And predictably, there was yet another clown in queue that wanted to saddle Candace Owens with that problematic assumption, and here's her response.
A person raised their hand in the audience after we gave a speech about, and obviously this is during the MAGA years, about this, need to return to having an identity, a national identity. And a woman asked the question, would you say that you're a nationalist? Because I feel like people are sort of afraid to embrace that term. And so I answered her and I said, I don't have a problem with the word nationalism. Actually, I think a lot of the times the reason why nationalism, the idea of caring about having like your nation's identity and fighting for policies that are pretty much America first, gets poisoned because people wrongly attribute nationalism to Adolf Hitler. It's not like he was just some guy that was in Germany saying, oh, I just want to make Germany great. And then I went on to say, obviously he invaded Poland, he had globalist ambitions, like none of this was okay. That was the end of it. But of course, when you pull it out of context and you're a journalist who's trying to smear someone, you try to make it seem like the person, I didn't even mention the word Jews. There's not even a question about whether we were talking about Jewish people, nothing. We were simply talking about the word nationalism and why people have hesitancy when they say that they are a nationalist or when they say that they're America first or whatever. So that was it. That was the end of it. There was no talk about saying Hitler was okay or this was great. It was just a topic about whether or not nationalism is rightly attributed or whether or not it is a dirty word. So I hope that provides some clarity for you.
And it should, because the idea of nationalism was born right around the idea of a nation state itself, in other words, a country. It originally had nothing to do with race, ethnicity, or any inherent individual characteristic. If you look at the world today, that is as globalized as it gets. Maybe nationalist is just an antonym to globalist. When that idea is put into practice, you see nationalist policies reflected in a kind of trade protectionism on the environment. Transitional agreements are not allowed to harm your own country, and on energy and resources, a nationalistic government tries to establish independence on its most critical supplies instead of just becoming a cog in a globalist machine after trading some of its sovereignty to centralized global bodies and agreements. For some reason, that's enough to get you attached to some of the most heinous criminals in existence after conflating that notion of nationalism to racial supremacist movements. That's the dangerous conflation that Candace Owens has been a victim of, and it's chased her as far as Congress. Watch her push back against attempts to connect her name to the Christchurch massacre during a congressional hearing a few years ago.
The audacity of you to bring up the Christchurch shooting manifesto and make it seem as if I laughed at people that were slaughtered by a homicidal maniac is, in my opinion, absolutely despicable, and I think that we should be above that. To try to assign reality or any meaning to a homicidal maniac writing a manifesto, which, by the way, let the record show, also stated Spyro the Dragon, the child's cartoon, as a source of inspiration. He also cited Nelson Mandela as a source of information. I don't think that Nelson Mandela has inspired mosque shootings. You can correct me if you think I'm wrong.
The truth is in plain sight. Any person that wants to carry out massacres like the one in Christchurch is ruled out as being a rational individual whose words can be taken with the same consideration as a normal person. That's because someone that has already decided to end the lives of dozens of people in a brutal fashion like that is looking for rationalizations and justifications in their mind to do it. And for that, they'll cling to any person, idea, or event to give themselves a clean sheet, even for heinous acts of criminality. What's really sad reflection on the state of our modern political discourse is that even deranged individuals' words would be lent any weight in attacking other side, even when your political opponents have said repeatedly, in no uncertain terms, they want nothing to do with them. That's the least bit of political respect and regard that should exist, otherwise politics itself devolves into a bitter game of never-ending vendettas. And it results in incidents like this where Candace Owens was swarmed by a group of protesters alleging that she had to answer for the Christchurch criminals' words about her.
Yeah. Walking path?
So how do you feel about the...
Is that Black Lives Matter?
How do you feel about the New Zealand shooter citing you in his manifesto?
Hey! Hey, how you doing?
How do you feel about the guy who murdered all those people in the mosque citing you?
I don't know him. Why? What a weird question to ask me. I don't know him.
Well, so why do you think, even if, like, I'm not saying you radicalized him, but why do you think he said you radicalized him?
I've never been to New Zealand. I don't know him, so I can't answer that.
Okay.
See what I mean? And it's not just for one side of the political aisle, but applies to everyone. If someone disavows fringe extremists on their side in no uncertain terms, the only person still wanting to saddle them with those extremes is likely just trying to score a political point, and that's an ugly game to play. It's what landed us in a political environment that's as fragmented as it is today until the guardrails give way and the political culture collapses into a dangerous irrationality. But let me know in the comments how you think we can stop that, because there's no doubt that it has only increased in the last few years.